Now, is there anything some people won't do to win? It's foul play.
Champions. Is the winner. And he might finish it off. Oh, it's a wonderful goal.
There are golden moments in every sport when athletes perform outstanding feats to win medals and trophies. But the prizes are so tempting that there are those who will go against the rules or the spirit of the game to win by any means necessary. Tonight, we reveal the gamesmanship and the scams and the outright cheats. The truth about foul play.
It was the biggest shock I'd ever had. I'd seen tactics, but they try and hurt you.
The one thing about footballers is they do bear grudges.
He got done for bringing the game into disrepute, and I got away with it.
It was probably the nastiest, ugliest incident of the decade.
It's a red card for Blanc.
Every sport, every game has its own code of conduct, regulations the players have to stay within. But sport is competitive and demanding. It pushes people to the edge both physically and mentally. When passions rise, emotions take over, and the rules can be forgotten.
Many athletes base their concept of self on whether they win or lose. In fact, for many athletes, defeat is worse than death.
Oh, Hunter, a bad tackle there on Ron Davis.
Norman Hunter's reputation as a hard man lives on today, almost 20 years after he retired. He was known as the defender who'd bite your legs.
And Hunter having a go at Rivera. And Soriano coming in, and somebody's got to go. Mayhem on the pitch.
But it didn't happen very often. But when it did, you've just gone. The brain's away. You don't really know. And sometimes I look back and think, that ain't me. I never did that. But he did. And the guy had a tap at me at the back, and then he had another go at me, and then I knew I'd lost it. Then there was a lot of problems, and somebody jumped at me, then caught me with their studs, and then there was fights, and I got sent off.
Cocker with Norman Hunter, and what a sad end for Leeds United.
When the red mist descends, a form of sporting madness takes hold. England versus South Africa's Eastern Province. It's been a dirty game, but for England's Tim Rodber, there's one punch too many.
Field going down, Melee going down. Now watch in picture right out to the left. There are the two players. Rodber getting in a super left hook, and then the Eastern Province guys in. Rodber was not to be stopped.
When people are in control, when they're able to determine their actions, you don't see it, but then suddenly the heart takes over, the adrenaline takes over, and when people lose control, that's when you see these acts of violence.
A badly aimed ball, and it's too much for the Durham Bulls batter. The ensuing ruck saw 10 players ejected from the game. A pitcher from the Salem Warthogs ended up in hospital.
People lose control because they're thwarted in their particular goal at that particular time. They spontaneously erupt. The energy force goes in a different direction to what it's meant to.
Watch the two cyclists at the top of the picture. Following a simple collision in the Tour of Spain in 1995, these two riders lost control. They were immediately suspended and fined heavily. Even players from the same team have been known to turn against each other. A vital European Champions League match between Blackburn Rovers and Spartak Moscow. The tie slipping away from Blackburn.
And the Kiprov coming forward again, and a lovely little return ball, and Mamiedo a brilliant third goal for Spartak Moscow, and Blackburn absolutely torn apart again there.
That season they played in Europe, they weren't good enough. They weren't really up to the challenge of playing in the Premier European competition, and it was just a gradual increase of frustration. There were some verbals, and that was followed by the exchange of blows.
Foul given out against Eleni Chep, and a punch shot between the two Blackburn players, Batty and Lasso. That is astonishing. It obviously followed that incident when they collided with each other, going for the same ball, and words were obviously spoken.
If somebody tries to thwart them in some way or other, spontaneously, sometimes that they take destructive action, both to the other person and themselves.
Loss of control can happen at all levels of the game. This time it's the South London Amateur Cup final. A last-minute goal is the spark that lights the flame. It starts with a scuffle, but in the end, even the managers become involved in a mass brawl. Some players have come to recognise the dangers of losing control.
I was told very early on when I was a young lad, there's no point really in going out to kick someone, because then you might get sent from the field. If you really love the game of football, you know, then the person who you're actually cheating is yourself.
Bobby Charlton didn't need telling twice. He made it to the very top. A World Cup triumph. Proof that the good guys do win sometimes. But in sport, a lot of the bad boys succeed too.
Looks for Cantona, yes!
For some, inspiration goes hand in hand with aggravation. The two feed off each other.
Cantona's in there too, and it might be Cantona! 2-0!
Eric Cantona came the skullduggery.
Bien levé, le bourgeois s'écroule, rien de grave cependant. Carton jaune pour le capitaine.
You didn't know whether the next minute he was going to beat three players and score a great goal, or put it in the top corner of the net, or he was going to walk away and chin the centre half.
I feel really sorry for Eric Cantona that he never really played in the World Cup, and he was never seen at the top competition in the world. But he had this problem with authority. When he felt that he wasn't being protected, you know, then he exploded. But that was his makeup. You know, he was a volatile character.
Look at this. Bruno wants to take the law into his own hands, and quite sensibly Lentini and Cavero restraining him.
In sport, professionals are required to show discipline and self-control. To stay out of trouble, to stay on the field, whatever the provocation.
Here's Voller.
Frank Rijkaard fouls Rudi Fuller. Bad enough. But then, unforgivably, he spits at the German.
He used to spit in your face sometimes, and that's very hard to accept that, you know. To turn the other cheek when somebody spits in your face is, it's not on.
There's Bremer's free kick. And Van Breukelen there getting just ahead of Rudi Voller. And a little bit of the needle now creeping into this game. Voller and Rijkaard having words there in that goal now.
After another incident, Rijkaard continues to provoke Fuller.
And a red card! A red card for Rudi Voller! That's unbelievable! And Rijkaard as well.
But Rijkaard isn't finished yet. He spits at him again.
I mean, I seen Jack Charlton chase a goalkeeper along the byline. We played Valencia one night at Ellen Road, and Jack used to stand in front of the keeper, and again the keeper spat in his face, which nobody likes, and Jack turned, and when the keeper saw the look in his eye, he automatically started running towards the corner flag, and it was quite hilarious seeing Jack chasing after him, and he caught him, of course, in the corner flag, because the keeper had one choice: he either jumped into amongst our fans or he turned and faced Jack. Well, of course, you know, there was all hell let loose.
Yeliaskov beat Roberts in the air. Now Cruyff. Thomas away.
We played Feyenoord. They had the great Johan Cruyff playing from Ruud Gullit played. And, you know, when you used to run down the tunnel, they used to spit at you. We had it at Barcelona. They would pull your hair at corners, pull your, you know, skin, do anything to upset you.
If you went down in the penalty area from a corner and they pretended to pick you up, but as they're picking you up, they're digging their nails in the end. And I reacted once to a goalkeeper who did that. He looked as if he was helping me up, but he was actually digging his nails into my back. And I sort of swung at him, and I got booked for it.
One of the most lethal weapons on a football field is a player's elbow.
I still wake up some winter mornings with a stiff jaw from that day back in, it was probably about 1984, I think. And I don't know whether it was headbutt or an elbow, but I did get smashed with something.
But some players don't need anything to go down. Diving. It's a fact of life in the modern game. It was the scourge of the last World Cup finals. But it's been going on for years.
Best. And Francis Lee is going to be booked for that. And he's suggesting absolutely graphically that it was a dive.
Ronnie Lee was, his nickname was Lee One Pen, because apparently one season he I don't know how many, he got about 20 penalties or something, and we gave him a little bit of stick saying he was diving. Even dear old Marshy admits that if he had a chance of going down and diving, he'd do it. I mean, and that's the way it was. It was professionalism from our point of view. It was cheating.
The weight on Lee's shoulders, and it doesn't worry him in the least.
The tricks of some players are becoming so sophisticated that it's becoming more difficult for a referee to spot exactly whether it's a true foul or it's a one which has been simulated.
There is a grey area between foul play and fair play. And it's here that the more cunning athlete can test, push, use, even bend the rules without ever quite breaking them.
I described Greg Chappell's actions as an act of cowardice, which I believe it was, and I thought it was most appropriate that the Australian team was dressed in yellow.
These pictures have become infamous. It was just an ordinary one-day international between Australia and New Zealand. It became a major diplomatic incident.
This particular instance was in a one-day game. A six had to be hit off the last ball for New Zealand to gain victory in that particular game. Greg Chappell ordered his brother, actually was the bowler at the time, to bowl one along the ground. He informed the umpires, because if he hadn't informed the umpires of the change of style, it would have been called a no ball. So he did things according to the book.
Looks to me as if they're going to bowl underarm off the last ball. The umpires have been told, the batsmen have been told, and this is possibly a little bit disappointing. Disappointing finish.
Greg Chappell is a very highly respected batsman and selector for Australia and cricket administrator and a working commentator. He has never really been forgiven by everybody for that complete brainstorm.
Such is the embarrassment caused by the incident that even now, almost 20 years later, the cricketing authorities still don't want it to be shown in Australia.
And that's a disappointing finish.
More underhand tactics. Michael Chang serving underarm to Ivan Lendl in the 1989 French Open. He didn't break any rules either.
People will push the rules, bend the rules to the limit in order to gain success. You had John Beck at Cambridge a few years back, and he was regarded as the master of gamesmanship there because some of the things he did were quite amazing, really.
Oh yeah, it's definitely mad. He's got a bit of a screw loose, but he's an oddball. In the same vein, he's very professional.
And here's Philpott again, and there's the goal.
They'd flood the pitch, they'd let the grass grow long in the corners so that Cambridge could hit long balls over. They'd give towels to the ball boys.
On a wet night, you get these ball boys to sort of dry the balls off before they were given to the players who then held the ball into the box. The visiting team weren't treated the same.
There were stories of removing the light bulbs from the opposition dressing room, turning the heating up when it was warm, leaving the heating off when it was cold.
Up goes Chappell and Heathcote. Good one.
If we'd scored a goal, he'd nominate someone before the game. That person went down and pretend to be injured, whether he was injured or not, just sort of like kill the game, really. He'd try anything to get the result without but bordering on the line of cheating.
John Beck's career is currently in limbo after he was fired from his last club, Lincoln, for breaches of club discipline. The 1984 European Cup final, Liverpool facing Roma in Rome. The world's premier club match had come down to a penalty shootout. Bruce Grobbelaar was the Liverpool goalkeeper.
Joe Fagan came up to me and he said, put his arm around me, and he said, listen, don't worry about it. You've done your job. If they cannot score from 12 yards, then, you know, they can't be that good. And as I took 2 steps away, he just shouted to me, but make sure you try and put them off. And that stuck in my head.
He can be a hero.
In the very last penalty was a chap called Graziani. And he picked up the ball, looked at me, kissed the ball, and put it down. And I thought, he's asking someone to help him here. So I gave him the spaghetti legs.
Now, will it be 3-3? Grobbelaar, antics on the line.
It helped teams to have a hard reputation. We saw the Leeds team in the 70s who were frightening. Sometimes they'd beat teams before they got out on the pitch.
Leeds had a bad reputation. Everybody said that they used the rules to the letter of the law, you know, and they sailed very close to the wind.
There's no doubt that the Leeds United team of the early 70s was a great team.
Jones, and Jones is winning it. Beautiful goal by Mick Jones.
They were a match for anybody, but they did like a drop of the hard stuff.
Indeed by Sprigg, and Sprigg has found goal. Clearly a punch. Now what's Mr. Burns going to do now? As soon as a Leeds man gets in trouble at the back, there are so many there.
And of course, they had Norman Hunter.
Given against Hunter.
I was told to go and win the ball and give it to those who could play.
The ball taken by Hunter. And the referee is feeling for the book. And it looks as though Hunter, warned once, is now going to have his name in the book.
I got all this reputation about being a hard man and all that, but I could only play the game in a certain way. I'm terrible in friendlies because I loved the hustle and the bustle and the league programme and me up against you and whoever I was playing against, because I played against some great forwards and I had to be up for it every game, and that was my game. I could psych myself up, and my job as it was then was to win the ball, and I was good at that. And if I could win it, whichever means were at my disposal, I would do it.
Really
Kenny Burns was another of the game's hard men, an aggressive Scot who knew exactly what he'd been hired to do.
Kenny Burns' boot, in fact, but it's a free kick nonetheless.
It's a job of work, and I had to do it. If we kept a clean sheet, we've got a chance of winning. I've got a chance of getting more money. I've got a chance of winning medals, and I'll do what I can. If I have to bend the rules a little bit in my favour, I'll do that.
Brian Clough's Nottingham Forest were winners at home and abroad. Kenny Burns was the man detailed to make sure that the opposition's star player did nothing to come between Nottingham Forest and their silverware.
The boss would point to number 8, like Trevor Francis. Trevor never used to like wearing shin pads. They made his legs look bulky. And, you know, he used to point to me, no pads. You know, in other words, you know, give him a good kick on them. Because they don't like a kick on the pads. You know, they start limping, they're not coming into a tackle. It's just that when Trevor went past, she's a problem. He was a bit fast to catch.
And now Gibson. Oh, all the way for Gibson! And a great goal!
But it didn't take the forwards long to work out how to get their own back.
I could run pretty fast then, and there's ways and means of slowing players like myself down. We was educated into tackling with the studs showing, not going over the top of the ball, studs up, onto the ball, and if someone was going to catch you, then at least you were protecting yourself slightly.
Well, he's battled in every sense of the word, some of it beyond the rule book, but that's right inside the rule book.
I tell you what, that is a leg breaker, that is a red card.
Some tackles threaten the very livelihood of players. Careers have been ended by over-the-top challenges.
Serious repercussions for Dennis Irwin.
The authorities have had to act, first by tougher refereeing, and in extreme cases, criminal prosecution. Scott McMillan, caught in the act of smashing his opponent's jaw and cheekbone. He got a 9-month jail sentence. Foul play is not always limited to those on the pitch. The excitement, pressure and frustration of top-level sport is felt by players, coaches and fans alike. A junior football game in America. 8-year-old schoolboys dreaming of playing in a Super Bowl one day. One of them, Sean Valdez, is poised to score a touchdown, but the opposition coach has come up with a revolutionary new tactic to stop him. The coach decides to tackle Sean himself. A grown man barging over an 8-year-old boy, all in the name of sport.
Aggressive players on the field, you know, are mirrored by aggression in the fans off the field.
He's in trouble. Nathan Morgan could stop this here.
Tony Wilson was taking a beating when a spectator got involved. It was Tony's mum, Mina, upset at the sight of her son losing.
Well, well, well.
Tony's opponent, Steve McCarthy, required 3 stitches in the back of his head as a result of Mina's attack. He refused to box on.
Well, I'm amazed.
Worse still, Tony was then awarded the bout.
So Louis Veach wins in 2 rounds.
Here in Batley, Louis Veach has just beaten Adi Benton when Adi's brother decides it's time to take things into his own hands.
Look at this week. What's going on here? What an idiot.
This time the verdict remained unchanged.
What a complete idiot.
Stop this in the ring. Hold on. Can you all, everybody keep calm, please. Can we stop this in the ring?
Normally you're focused, all your mental energies and your physical energies are focused on a particular goal in hand in the sport, and something disrupts that. Either attention of a referee or a fan or one of the opposing players, and you respond to that stimulus in maybe a destructive way.
Wrestling referee Bob West was knocked unconscious. His 17-year-old assailant got 30 days in jail.
Hammered is the winner.
And there it is. What a penalty. Oh, there we go. Circus clown to the end, isn't he? Oh, how about that one? I think he's going to annoy as many people as he's going to please. All right, we've all seen it, son. Get somebody else on.
Supreme confidence. Nobody knows quite where it comes from, but all the great performers have it. There's no mention of confidence in the rules of sport, though.
An individual who is high in self-confidence can use psych-out strategies to great effect. As soon as you break the consistency in somebody's game, then you have broken them.
One simple tactic is backchat, verbals.
We used to wind him up, tell him he had 2 left feet, and if he didn't watch it, we'd kick him over the stand, and at the end of it, he would be so wound up and trying to beat us and punch us that he would take his mind off the game.
I think when you're playing that everyone tries to outdo each other with the old chat, and that's what happened, you know. They'd come up to your ear and say a few words, and then you do the same back to them. It was chat.
I suppose we were all involved in it. I mean, I might be bowling and a batsman get an edge through the slips to the boundary, and I might say something like, you know, you've got more edges than a broken piss pot, or something like that. The Australians had it down to a pretty fine art, and at times that was not for family viewing. They might say something like, you're getting so near square leg, you're going to slip in your own excrement, but they wouldn't use the word excrement.
Arrogance, showmanship, mind games. They're as much a part of the makeup of a champion boxer as his ability. Prince Naseem Hamed has the lot.
For me to mentally beat an opponent mentally, it's a really big thing for me. If I beat a man mentally, then it's going to be a lot easier beating him physically, you know. I prefer to get in the ring and You can call them mind games or whatever. It's mentally being stronger than your opponent. I've never ever come across nobody when I fought that's had the stronger mind than me.
He's only a young kid, and another nice little punch. He's switching to orthodox, good right hand.
I think, like Ali, about 20, 30 years ago, Naz has mastered the art to the point where his opponents either question their right to be in the ring with him, or else are so angry and infuriated by what he's been doing and saying that they neglect their tactics and strategy and fight a silly fight.
And you just watch what he'll do there if he stops his follower in the second round, which is a good result.
1, 2, 3. When you're talking about talking to him at the same time as punching him, there was once in the Robinson fight where I remember Steve saying before the fight, I'm stronger than him, and he's the strongest featherweight in the world and stuff like that. And so at the same time as punching him, I was saying to him, at the same time as me boxing him, definitely I was saying to him, I thought you were stronger than me. I thought you were stronger than me. I mean, you're supposed to be more experienced, and, you know, this is easy. This is easy, Steve. You got to work a lot harder than this. Do you know what I mean? And I was punishing him at the same time because of the stuff he said before the fight.
Whatever Steve brought to the ring was steadily eroded throughout the fight by the taunts and the humiliation that Hamed kept heaping on him.
Once you beat a man in the mind, you beat him. Trust me.
Montreal, 1980, one of the fights of the century. The artist, Sugar Ray Leonard, versus the street fighter, Roberto Duran.
Duran is probably the finest pure fighting animal that I've ever seen in the ring.
This man, Duran, he really does intimidate opposition.
There's one fight early in his career, not for a title, of course, where he knocked a guy out and the guy's girlfriend got in the ring and he knocked her out.
The champion, Leonard, started favourite. Light on his feet, quick with his hands, he was expected to dance Duran into exhaustion and submission.
Leonard was the golden boy, the Olympic champion, the matinee idol who could do nothing wrong. It was a wonderful contrast in personalities, and Duran used the difference in their personalities as a weapon.
In the days leading up to the fight, Leonard's trainer, Angelo Dundee, felt that his fighter had lost some of his poise. Duran had insulted Leonard's family. For Sugar Ray, it had become personal.
What happened to him psychologically, he got broken down because Duran taunted him in front of his wife. Gonna kill him, I'm gonna kill him. You know, he speak, and he couldn't speak English. And he was giving this kind of stuff in front of his wife. Said, I'll show this sucker, I'm gonna beat him up. And I couldn't get it out of his head to box him.
And just look at this, what a payoff this is going to be.
Ray wanted to beat him up. Back alley stuff. Can't do that. You gotta beat a guy with what's you're supposed to do.
Too late for a knockout now. The bell would go, of course, if there was a man down. What a flashy finish.
Angry, Leonard had decided to fight Duran.
There it is, it's all over.
The champion abandoned his usual boxing style in favour of a toe-to-toe brawl.
Duran beat Leonard by making Leonard fight on Duran's own terms, by making him stand and brawl with Duran, which was Duran's game. He was the master brawler.
And Roberto Duran's won it.
Duran put Sugar Ray Leonard at a disadvantage even before they climbed through the ropes. The sporting greats can do that. Their reputation alone intimidates opponents. Cleveland, Ohio. It was here that the life of the sporting legend ended on December the 11th, 1980. Stella Walsh was 70 when she was murdered in a parking lot for $13 in loose change. Her life and sprinting achievements shrouded in mystery for over half a century.
The women's 100 meters. Hilda Strike of Canada breaks fastest and leads for a while. But Stanislava Volosovic, Stella Walsh to you, wears her down and wins by 6 inches to equal the world's record of 11.9 seconds.
Stella Walsh was the Flojo of her day, the greatest track star of the pre-war era. Queen not only of the sprints, but also the long jump and discus too.
In the history of world athletics, and we're looking back a long time, Stella Walsh was extraordinary, not only for winning an Olympic gold medal in the 100 meters in Los Angeles in 1932, and getting a silver in 1936 in Berlin, but because she set 14 world records.
I'm very happy to have won this title for my homeland, especially because it was in world record time.
But all the glittering prizes couldn't silence the gossips. In the era before steroids, there could only be one other explanation for her startling performance and powerful physique. Was Stella Walsh really a man?
Stella Walsh did have some manly characteristics. I mean, she had a strong body, strong arms, features that were somewhat manly features, but then she also had features that were females' features. I think if you look at Stella Walsh's legs or her upper body, you would see that she looked like a female. I think if you look at her arms, her face, you would say she looked something like male.
Her tragic death provided the chance to set the record straight. At the autopsy, the coroner found Stella Walsh suffered from a chromosome abnormality that made her of indeterminate sex. She was part male, part female.
If it had happened in this day and age, this type of a mosaic pattern would be discovered at the time of birth. And then the physicians would talk to the parents, and a decision would be made as to how they want to raise this child, as a female or a male. Unfortunately, Stella Walsh was born at a time where these opportunities and these medical advances were not available. So she lived the way she was born. She probably could have lived as a man because it was a mosaic pattern and indeterminate sex.
Although the question of Stella's gender has been resolved, the advantage it gave her on the track is still in question. Despite a media campaign to strip her of her titles, she remains an Olympic champion. After the break, how a razor blade was used to give Chile the edge in a vital World Cup qualifier. And the boxers who just can't keep their hands off each other.
It's the first time I've ever seen anything like it in my life. It's completely different than anything I've ever been used to or ever seen.
In 1968, Manchester United, as champions of Europe, faced the Argentine team Estudiantes for the World Club Championship. The first leg was played in Buenos Aires. For George Best, the game stands out, but for all the wrong reasons.
Well, it was the biggest shock I'd ever had. I'd seen tactics, but they try and hurt you.
A couple of the players, certainly myself, came off with an injury by one of the players that was really unnecessary. It was something that happened after the ball.
They weren't interested in playing football. The idea, I think, was to get as many of our players off the pitch as possible. And if I remember it, I think nobody was sent off in the first game.
Estudiantes won the first leg 1-0. But the Manchester United players, their fans, the visiting British press corps were not impressed.
It was a vile match. It was violent, intimidating, provoking, time-wasting, call it what you might. This is what the match was like over there.
The scene was set for the return leg a week later in Manchester.
Do you want banning from football, all Argentinians?
We want to see football. We don't want to see animals like they are. We want to see good football.
Estudiantes in a workout for Wednesday's game at their training ground in Cheshire.
I used to live at Lim, and the Estudiantes team stayed there for the second leg. And of course, we'd been saying, oh God, what a set of players these are. Wait till you see this. And when they came to Lim, my little village, they were absolute angels. Even the milk float, my wife said, the milk floats are going past, and it had Argentinian streamers on it, you know, like, and we felt as though we were the bands at the end of the day. And the PR that they did leading up to the second leg here was absolutely sensational. You've got to hold your hands up. And as soon as the whistle went for the second leg here, bang, in they went again.
One guy, I can't remember who it was, all he did was follow me around the pitch and kick the lumps out of me, the same as he had in the first game. We knew we weren't going to win because they weren't going to let us. They were going to stop us any way they could, and I did snap and I just smacked somebody. And I walked off even before the referee sent me off. I knew that was it. that was one time I did react quite viciously.
Sport is all about rivalries. Some bring out the best in fellow competitors, others the worst. A rain-swept rooftop in central London, and journalists assemble for a press conference to publicise the forthcoming fight between British boxer Herbie Hyde and America's WBO champion Michael Bent.
Have you got enough?
It was a fight that was to start rather sooner than anybody had expected.
If you're as good as you look, Michael, you'd be a bit enticing, but you're not, so I wouldn't bother looking at you. Come on. Easy, easy, man. Put it down, put it down. Come on. Stop, break it up. Hey, go. Come on. Hey.
They were fighting so badly and wrestling on the floor that it had to be real. In other words, it became a push-shove straight out of a local bar. Though, of course, neither was drunk. And that's how informal fights begin.
Come on, break it up, break it up, break it up.
Almost like two ladies with a handbag hitting each other. And I just thought, oh dear, it's all got out of control, and I could see the promoter going pale. This wasn't what he wanted. They were due to fight at Millwall, not in the West End Hotel.
Herbie Hyde won the rematch and his first world title with it. What is condemned in some sports as foul play is condoned in others as being part of the game. Ice hockey is known as much for its fights on the ice as for its high-speed action. The fans expect to see a punch-up, and they're rarely disappointed.
Fighting is accepted in ice hockey because it is a contact sport, and sometimes, you know, your emotions and your, you know, desire to win really get, you know, pushed to its maximum, and sometimes conflicts happen, and the best way to, you know, to dissolve that, your energies, is just have a little fight with a player on the other team.
Ice hockey players don't wear helmets just for the fun of it. It's hand-to-hand combat, man against man. And for Hilton Ruggles, there's one man in particular.
Yes, Ryan Kumo. We've had a few altercations over the past 7 or 8 seasons. Well, the altercation that Ryan Kumo and I had started the shift before that. He was just going to play the puck, and I came in a little bit high on him, and one of my gloves got up around his ear. And he got a little bit upset with that, so then we carried on. We got in the penalty box, and things got out of hand. It's nothing personal.
The one thing about footballers is they do bear grudges. You know, if somebody's fouled them, if somebody, sometimes it's just a case of having a good game against them, or if somebody said something in the newspaper that upsets them, they remember the next time they meet that player.
One of the most notorious personal duels of all was Norman Hunter versus Francis Lee.
And a fight going off the ball between Hunter and Lee. The fists were flying.
Franny had a little dive for a penalty, and really, I shouldn't have done it, and I got the red mist again, and I went for him, and he went for me, and then we ended up having a throw a few punches. Then we both got sent off.
Norman Hunter's name going in. And the referee is waving the other players away. And Lee is booked also. And I'm wondering if he sent them off, because they're wandering away to the far side of the field. And it looks to me as if it's broken out again. It's broken out again, and now this time a complete free-for-all.
As we're going off, we started again. The sad thing for Franny was that he didn't really do that much wrong, and he got done for bringing the game into disrepute, and I got away with it. So, but we're all right now. Last time I saw him at Manchester City when he was chairman, I was walking up the steps, and he said, "Norman," and he stood with Midgley. Neil Midgley, he said, "Norman, the boardroom's free. So that's me and you go in there and finish that fight," he said, "and see who wins." And then I just laughed about it, and that was it. It happened.
Winning, it seems, is everything. And the very tools of the athlete's trade, the sports equipment itself, offers yet another opportunity to get an unfair advantage. Why, even the flick-to-kick skills of table football have been tainted by controversy.
I've seen some shocking things in table football over the last 8 to 9 years.
I was the president of the Worldwide Subbuteo Club, and I went to the final, and they told me that in one of the earlier rounds the Germans had been disqualified because one of them had put an extra layer of lead on the goalkeeper to make him just a little bit bigger. Equipment obviously can be manipulated in many ways. Manipulation of figures is the most common form of cheating. They can be weighted down with forms of glues and weights. The figures can be stretched, i.e. the goalkeeper figure can be stretched, the arms, by means of heating it up, therefore creating irregular heights and widths. The Italians were time wasting. They were time wasting at Subbuteo. You know, they were playing against the clock. It was absolutely fantastic. And I wasn't disappointed. I just thought, well, life's life, isn't it, you know? When I see people cheating, I usually point them out and say, hey, stop, you know, this is not the done thing. Portray the game as it should be portrayed, in a fair and honest and sporting way. Otherwise, there's no point in you playing.
While an extra lick of paint suffices in table football, it's a razor blade to reach the 1990 World Cup finals.
The pressures around the World Cup were very apparent when, in qualifying between Chile and Brazil, Chile were losing and about to go out the World Cup, and suddenly a flare came on from the terraces, and the goalkeeper decided to lay flat out in his goal mouth.
With blood streaming from his face, Roberto Rojas, the injured goalkeeper, was led off the pitch. The rest of the Chilean team went with him. It looked like there would have to be a replay. But a high-level FIFA investigation revealed that Rojas hadn't been hit at all. While everybody was looking at the flare, the keeper deliberately cut his face with a razor blade that he'd stashed away before the game. Rojas was banned from international football for the rest of his life. At the 1976 Olympic Games in Montreal, an aging Russian pentathlete, Boris Onyshenko, knew that it was his last chance to win gold.
The incident involving Boris Onyshenko in the fencing part of the modern pentathlon was the most clear-cut and overwhelming example of cheating that I can remember from 40 years of covering the Olympics.
It was Britain's Jim Fox who had his suspicions about Onyshenko. In fencing, each successful hit is indicated by a light. The Russian's light seemed to be coming on without him actually touching his opponent.
He was fencing Adrian Parker to start with, and the fence went on, and he appeared to be short, and the light went on. So Adrian complained, and we tested the normal things to test the bell guard to see if it was ringing on there or ringing on the blade, and it wasn't, so we had to accept it. I fenced him next. And as he stepped in, I stepped in as well, picked up his blade in high six, he was left-handed, and slammed it into his chest. Now, there was no doubt about the hit at all, but the light came on against me. So I grabbed hold of his sword, and the president said, no, look, let go, Jimmy, you've got to let him get on with this bout. I said, no, there's something wrong with his sword. So they came along and they took it, and about 2 hours later, somebody had taken the leather binding off the handle, and they found a micro switch. It's just like a light switch. You press the leather, and it goes down across both wires and completes the circuit, so a hit goes on against you. Immediately the result came out that he had a micro switch in his handle. He was led away to the harbour where there was a Russian ship, and that's the last we saw of him.
It showed clearly such premeditation. He'd gone away and worked on this, and he was prepared to have the heart to walk into an Olympic area. How did he feel when he walked in there? Incredible.
Cheating nearly deprived Jim Fox of a gold medal. But for boxer Billy Collins Jr., the loss was much greater.
And in the blue corner, undefeated in 14 fights, Billy Collins.
It was a big fight night at New York's Madison Square Garden.
Billy Collins was an unbeaten welterweight prospect, a very good young fighter. Hadn't quite made the breakthrough into world rankings yet, but he wasn't far away from it.
And now in the red corner, Luis Resto.
He was matched with a guy called Louis Resto, who was a good, tough journeyman fighter.
Well, you can see right away they came to fight. Oh, yeah. You can see it.
The kind of guy you have to beat if you're going to get into world class.
On the night of the fight, Billy Collins Sr. was in his son's corner, confident of victory. He couldn't understand why his son was in trouble so soon.
Why you getting your leg and back you up? I'm tired of it, man. How you feeling? Come on. No, he's tired too, man. He's tired too. He's getting tired too.
And Collins took the most fearful beating. I mean, it was a career-ending beating. His face was butchered. I mean, his cheekbones were smashed. He took a fierce, unmerciful beating.
All right, that's it. That's it. He's saved. Look at that. I bet they get up and give him a big hand the whole place.
Despite taking such a battering, Billy Collins Jr. was still standing at the end of the 10 rounds. The decision went to Louis Resto, who then came over to the Collins corner.
He come to the corner, and I don't know why I did it. He reached for his hand to shake my son's hand, and I reached for it myself.
He went over to congratulate Resto on his victory and tapped him on the glove and felt, knuckles where there should have been stuffing.
You can't hold the commissioner. All the pens on him, damn glove. All the pens on him, goddamn glove. He didn't have any padding in the
They gave themselves a physical edge, an unfair physical advantage, by removing the stuffing from the gloves. It was probably the nastiest, ugliest incident of the decade in boxing. I don't think I can recall a fighter in worse shape after a 10-round fight than Billy Collins was after 10 rounds of being pounded by what were effectively Louis Resto's bare fists. I mean, his face was smashed. It was pulp. There's no other word for it. I mean, it looked like he'd gone through the windscreen of a car.
Both Billy's opponent, Louis Resto, and his trainer, Panama Lewis, were jailed for their part in the scandal.
It's like the cartoon equivalent of the horseshoe and the glove. It's something that just shouldn't be done. And in Collins's case, it had fatal consequences because Billy went completely off the rails. Boxing, it was his life, and suddenly his career had been taken away from him. He drank very heavily, and within a year was dead.
He had no quit in him. If he had quit in him the night of the fight, he'd be alive today. I wish he had.
Deaths are rare in sport, but pressures are not. Everyone loves a winner, whatever it takes.
The demands on players and on managers and on coaches and on clubs for success means, that sometimes they just cross the line, between what is fair and what's not fair.
On school playing fields the world over, the sports stars of tomorrow are imitating the heroes of today. Never mind the taking part.
I think winning has become the be-all and end-all for a lot of teams now, and that's not just at the highest levels. I think we see signs of that even in schoolboy football, in youth football. We've got a lot of pot hunters now, and that's a sad trait.
France are the world champions, and the flashlights around the Stade France go glittering away.
It's not just about the trophies anymore. Losers can become outcasts, winners can become millionaires, whether by fair play or foul.
Foul play has been around as long as sports has been in existence in all nations. It's an inherent part of human nature and will always exist where there is competition between people.
Next to Anglia, dreaming of a right Christmas with Ian Wright and guests, including Robson Green, Meatloaf, and the Lighthouse Family.